Hi there, I'm Carly, the Daycare Guide, and today we're talking about a topic that early childhood educators, childcare providers, preschool teachers actually dread talking about with you, the parent. We'll be talking about what to do when your child's preschool or childcare provider brings up a concern about your child, specifically about developmental delays, whether cognitive or social emotional or physical, that something about your child is registering as off to them and they want to address it with you. I'm going to be talking about the childcare provider's perspective as well as next steps for you to take as the parent. I want to start off with explaining about the childcare provider's perspective and why it's important for you to understand. It's important for you to know that having this conversation with you as the parent is the most petrifying conversation that we have to have. We'd much rather not do it. This conversation is dreadful. Telling a parent that their most precious and perfect and beloved treasure, their child, that we have concerns about their child's development, that something might be a little off with them, that we're seeing some red flags in their development. So it's essential that you know that preschool and childcare providers, they're in this field because they love children, because they are passionate about working with children, and they want to help and aid in their development. They're definitely not in it to get rich quick or something like that, because anyone who knows anything about childcare knows the pay is not good. If they're in this field, it's because they love working with children. So with that understanding and with that said, if they're bringing a concern up to you, it's not because they're trying to attack you or they have something personal against you or your child or they dislike your child. It's nothing like that. They really want to help your child's development. And these types of conversations are never brought up on a whim. If your child's teacher or provider is bringing this up to you, it's after many meetings with administration, with an ed consultant, with other teachers, talking about who's going to say what, what's the best time to meet with them, which parent should they bring it up to. It's really nerve-wracking to bring up. So a lot of thought and planning went into this before we're bringing it up to you. And actually, it's easier just to stay quiet, even though we may see some red flags in your child's development, but we know that in the long run, it will end up hurting them. That's why, despite the discomfort in bringing it up to you, we're still bringing it up. So even though this is a really sensitive and emotional topic for you to hear as the parent, it's really important for you to listen with an open mind and be receptive. So your immediate reaction, you don't want to minimize it, you don't want to blow it off, you don't want to be in denial. Even if you feel the sense of denial inside and you're panicked and you're upset and you're scared and you're like, no, not my child. It's okay to express how you're feeling, that this is upsetting, this is frustrating, this is scary for you. But if you just automatically deny it and minimize it and, oh no, I never see that at home. Oh, that's never happened before. Oh no, their pediatrician said they're fine. Oh no, I think they're fine. Hearing those kind of statements like literally drive us bonkers. That's fine if you don't see it at home, but it still doesn't erase the concerns that we have about your child and what we've observed while they're in the program. All right, the second point and perspective that I really want you to consider is that having the input of your child's preschool or childcare teacher or director or provider, it's really like a golden resource. Think about it. Your pool of other children that you've seen or interacted with, unless you work with children, of course, is probably pretty limited. So seeing other children of a similar age and being able to compare the different milestones or development probably expands to a couple siblings if you have any other children, maybe a couple cousins, maybe a couple friends, and that's probably it. But early childhood teachers, their pool of observation of young children of a similar age group expands hundreds, if not thousands of children, and sometimes their experience expands across decades. The average person on the street doesn't really know, what's typical for different milestones at different ages, but early childhood educators have a ton of experience and education on what is typical and expected for each age range. And of course, I do want to note that every child is individual and no development is the same, but I'm referring to the typical age range of what is appropriate and expected for children. So early childhood educators can typically tell within a very short period of time if something is off with the child, even at a very young age. Sometimes I've seen infants that are just a few months old and like red flags are going off in my head, like, that's not typical, or that's a concern, that's a red flag. And of course, being that young, sometimes they resolve, sometimes they don't. As a director, there's been times that I've taken families on a tour, I've met their child just for a few minutes in the office, we chit chat, I can already tell something's off. Then we go visit a classroom, they interact with the teacher a little bit, the teacher observes for a few minutes, then the tour finishes and the teacher's in my office and we're both on the same page. You saw that, right? You saw that red flag, right? Even though the parents didn't mention anything, we don't even know if they're aware of it or not. And of course, not in all cases, there's exceptions, but quite often that's how fast that early childhood educators are able to tell that your child may have a developmental delay. So my point in sharing all this is that you as the parent are in the perfect position to have this amazing resource of your childcare provider, your preschool provider, to share resources, to share their knowledge, to share their observations. to share their experience with you that they've gained not only from education and courses and professional development, but from hands-on experience, which is, in my opinion, the most valuable. Why not take advantage of that, right? So don't fall into the trap of just denying it because it hurts too much, because in the long run, that will end up just hurting your child, which we'll get into a little bit later in the video. Now let's get into next steps. So if and when your child's teacher or director brings this up to you, you want to listen carefully to their input. If initially it's too shocking to you and your brain just shuts down, you go into denial, schedule another meeting with them so you can talk it through, you can take some notes when you're not in such a shocked and sensitive state. The good news is that you're hearing about this during your child's early years, during the first 5 years when 85 to 90% of their brain is being developed. It's an essential, crucial time. I would much rather hear about it during the first 5 years than during elementary years or middle school when it's a lot harder to intervene. So with that, let's talk about early intervention. What is early intervention? Research shows that getting your child the help and resources that they need earlier on has significant positive impacts and benefits, regardless of whatever the delay or the issue may be. So next steps in the process might include an evaluation, either by the program's education consultant or sometimes a special education professional from the public school system will come and evaluate them, or they may recommend that an independent consultant or professional such as a speech pathologist or occupational therapist should evaluate them. Usually programs don't have these type of specific professionals working in the program, so a lot of times things might be outsourced, or they might bring consultants and specialists into the program to observe your child in their classroom environment and also do some observations individually. And then they'll determine a recommended plan of action and meet with you, the parent, about it to recommend next steps. And it's important to note that it's not uncommon that children that receive the early intervention that they need are able to make vast improvements in a short amount of time. And sometimes the issue is completely resolved and there's no more developmental delay. I've seen this happen a lot of times successfully. And on the other hand, if the issues go unaddressed because it's too painful, or you're in denial, or you don't want to because you haven't seen it at home or something like that, this can have detrimental consequences. I want to share a quick story about this. A few years back, a parent came to us saying that she was looking for documentation and notes from her child's file when the child was in preschool. The child was now in, I think, 3rd or 4th grade. And even in 3rd or 4th grade, the child was completely unable to read. She had such a severe cognitive developmental delay that even well into her elementary school years, she still couldn't make progress. So the school or the doctor, I can't remember which one, recommended that she come back and get the files from as far back as it was documented. And sure enough, it was so sad. The teachers had everything documented of all the times that they met with the parent, all of her evaluations done, observations done. All of their concern was noted, and it was also noted that the parent refused to do anything about it. The parent was in complete denial. And what's so sad about it is that because of the parent's pain and refusal to acknowledge the issue or even consider it, it ended up hurting who? Like the child. In the long term, many years later. That's why it's worth at least looking into it. Get an evaluation done. I do want to note something about input from pediatricians. Pediatricians can be a great resource. But one thing that drives early childhood educators crazy is when we bring up a developmental concern and the parent says, oh, their pediatrician says they're right on track, they're fine. I need to take deep breaths for this one. It's no argument that pediatricians have the most schooling and medical training and education compared to early childhood educators who have little to none. However, pediatricians are seeing your child once every 3 to 6 months or maybe longer for what, like 5-10 minutes? Early childhood providers are with your child day in and day out for 40, 50, 60 hours a week. They're with your child during the week, during their waking hours, more than you are. It adds up to hundreds or thousands of hours a year that they're spending with your child. So just because a doctor doesn't see something during their 5-minute visit doesn't mean it doesn't exist. Objectively, who has more observation time? And sometimes what we see happen is parents are already in denial and minimizing the issue. So when they go to the pediatrician to ask about it, they're already expressing it in a way that isn't as objective as we'd like, that's not exactly relaying our concerns, but more so in a way, I don't think that's a big of a deal for their age, right? This is normal, right? And as the parent is trying to persuade them also to minimize the issue and downplaying the childcare provider's concerns, quite often the doctor will just agree with the parent. Again, pediatricians are a great resource. Don't use that as an excuse to not explore options in getting your child the help that they may need. As an early childhood educator with more than 20 years experience working in the field, the best advice I can give is to listen and trust your preschool or childcare provider. Just look into the resources. Who cares about labels? No one cares. It doesn't mean your child isn't special or loved. At least explore it. Do an evaluation. See if there's any recommended treatment options. You can check with your provider. You can also check with your town or city or state. They also usually have a lot of resources. Take advantage of them. That's what they're there for. There's so many resources out there. Even if you go through with an evaluation and treatment and it ended up being that your child didn't really have anything serious going on, you don't lose anything. But on the other hand, if you're just in denial and don't go through with any next steps, what if that ends up affecting your child down the road, 5, 10, 15, 20 plus years later? You'll have regret for the rest of your life and you'll never forgive yourself for it. Just like in the case of the 3rd grader I was mentioning. I do want to also state that I'm not at all saying that preschool and childcare programs are always 100% correct when they have a concern. But the point that I'm trying to make is at least look into it and explore it rather than just blowing it off and minimizing it. Because if it is actually something, early intervention can really help your child. But if it ends up not being anything, you don't lose anything. It's better to be safe and sorry. There's no harm done in doing an evaluation and checking out some treatment options. All right, there's a lot in this topic that can be covered. If there's one thing you should take away from this video, it's early intervention is key. It is successful. I tried to keep it as high level as possible and summarize everything, but if you have any specific questions or concerns that you'd like to touch base with me about, feel free to leave it in the comments below, or you can send me a DM, follow me on Instagram, send me a DM there, and I'd be happy to chat more about concerns that you might have about your child or about a similar situation. I know this was a sensitive topic, a sensitive video. I really wish you the best of luck. Thanks for watching. I hope this was helpful. Be sure to subscribe to my channel for more childcare tips and tricks for parents. I'll see you next time. Bye.